I'm not sure if people are aware, again, to give an American example, but it's not just an American example. In the democracies today, we take for granted that all citizens vote or are eligible to vote. So just to give a very easy example, women, that's 50% or more of the population, adult population. They vote in a democracy. I'm not sure that people are aware just what it took for women to be able to vote in a democracy. I'm not talking about what it took to get the democracy in the first place. I'm talking about countries that had a vote, had elections, but women were excluded. Now, it wasn't that women one day showed up and said, "Oh, can we please participate in your democracy and vote? Will you let us vote?" And everybody was like, "Oh, sure. Why didn't you just tell us? We would have let you vote before. Please, here's the voting booth. Please come in and vote." That's not how it works. They had to struggle for 100 years, and successive generations had to struggle, and they were thrown in prison, and they went on hunger strikes, and they were constantly arrested and harassed until in the end they triumphed. And of course, the way that history works, it's quite cruel. It's ironic and also cruel. We start taking things for granted. We take things for granted. We don't realize the origins of how we have things, even things like the fact that we have weekends. Some people have weekends, not everybody has them. A lot of people have to work on weekends, but many of us have weekends. The ability on the weekend to relax with our families, with our friends, or even just with ourselves, have some time off, to read a book, to travel, to recharge, to sleep, those things, right? So many of us just take for granted. Though the weekend, there were people who died, I'm not being melodramatic, who died fighting for the right to have a day off at the end of the week from working. Now, do we know who these could the people listening now tell you offhand who those people were who got us weekends, who got us the right to vote? They probably couldn't. It would be difficult. Some could, but it's not Winston Churchill or Napoleon or Genghis Khan or some of the men on horses that people often associate with leadership. It's not Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or anybody like that. There's often people that are completely anonymous. We don't know their names. And yet those people are some of the greatest and most transformative leaders we have ever seen. So often people ask me, "Professor Temkin, who is your favorite leader?" And I'll say, "You've never heard of them. You don't know. If I told you their names, you wouldn't know who they are. Let's study. Let's read about them." So I don't want to give everything away, Armin, because I got to keep some mystery and mystique.
Sure,
if
you have a book coming out.
Look at my
as
book,
well,
which is coming out, you will learn not just about these unsung anonymous people. No worries. You will also learn about Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. and Winston Churchill, Margaret Thatcher, many important leaders from the world. But we will also look at leaders who deserve to have their names etched in people's minds, and yet they're largely forgotten. And so I think it's very, very important for us to keep in mind when we talk about admiration, that we remember to admire not just the famous names or the people who are the most kind of, memorialized, but those who have kind of been forgotten or even erased. And sometimes, I'll add something else. Martin Luther King Jr. We again live in a world in which our memories are very selective. So we tend to forget, right, that Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't just, now he's a holiday, he's commemorated. In 1983, the United States government made Martin Luther King Jr. federal holiday. But he was assassinated just 15 years earlier at age 39. And during the years prior to his assassination, he spent most of that time in and out of prison. How do you go in the span of 15 years from being essentially treated as a terrorist and a criminal to being seen as a hero, but that your political, the substance of your leadership and what you believed in is kind of put aside or even drained of meaning? That's something that fascinates me, right? Well, I always want to understand how that happens. So that's another thing that I write about. I write about quite a bit. So the other thing I would suggest to everyone listening in is to keep a very open mind about where your sources of inspiration can come from. It's not because, you know, you're reading about, let's say, someone who's involved in some kind of social struggle, that is only applicable to social struggles. You can be even working in the financial sector and learn from people who have nothing to do with the financial sector.
Sure.
And vice versa. You can be someone. I have a whole chapter about what it is to lead under tyranny. That is when you have no power, when you're in danger. And you can learn in those situations from people in the past who were in equivalent situations, but you can also learn from the Machiavellian types, right? And apply those lessons to your own circumstances. There's a lot of cross-pollination, I would say, between different kinds of leadership that I get into. And I think that it's also important for people to keep in mind why they want to be, if they want to be leaders, why do you want to be a leader? It can't just be about your personal success. It can't just be about money, although money is important, I concede, and I like it just as much as the next guy. But it is about something that's beyond ourselves. It's about our society, it's about our community, it's about the world that we live in. So those are the kinds of leaders that I admire.